What if that nagging feeling in the back of your neck was real? What if those hands reaching out from the dark that you believed were there were there? What if the monster in the basement really existed? And what if there was really something under the bed? Would you have the courage to face your fears?
Hello, brave souls. I've got something a little different for you tonight. This is actually the story that started this channel in the first place. An older channel. This is the second version of the Fear channel that I've made. And it's a story that's very important to me, so I hope you enjoy it. I have a couple parts to it, so if you guys enjoy this, maybe I'll post the other ones too. But brace yourself for the Lost Generation.
Welcome to Season 1 of Fear. In this season, we follow a young man as he tries to uncover the pieces of his grandfather's past after he passes away. With every new clue, though, more questions come up. Follow Paul as he tries to unearth the truth in the Lost Generation.
I just got the bad news. My grandfather had passed away last night from a heart attack. We had always worried this was going to happen because he was crippled with anxiety. My parents would never tell me why Grandpa always seemed so nervous, but it probably had to do with the time he served in the army. My mom told me the funeral would be held in a week, and I could stay at my grandfather's house to save money. Money was pretty tight right now, and that was a nice thing not to have to worry about. My grandmother was still alive, and could use the company. It took about 6 hours to get from Massachusetts, where I was currently studying to be a veterinarian, to northern New York, where my grandfather lived after his time in the service. I pulled up to the old Victorian-looking house, and remembered all the summers I had spent there as a child. My father, also named Paul, had already made it to the house before me. He saw that I had pulled in and came out to give me a hug and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine and went in to see how my grandmother was doing. She wasn't doing well at all, which is to be expected. She was a tough old bird though, covered in tattoos and didn't take anyone's crap. Luckily for me, she had a soft spot and gave me a massive hug and asked if I was hungry. I was hungry, so she made me a grilled cheese sandwich, and I headed to the room that I would be staying in for the next few days. Now, my grandfather was an odd guy, but no weirder than any other grandparents. The only thing that I thought was odd was that he was always writing in his journal. It was a hardcover black journal, but he always made time to write it each day. He never let anyone read it while he was alive, so my first mission was to find that journal and hopefully learn a little bit more about the man. I asked my grandmother if she had seen it, and she told me that she hadn't been able to find it at all. So I spent the day looking for it throughout the whole house, and saying hi to anybody who happened to stop by and say sorry for our loss. I had just about given up looking for the journal when I accidentally dropped the box on the floor. The box was filled with heavy textbooks, so when it hit the side of the wall, some of the panels came loose. It looked like there was a small room through the wall, something big enough that a grown man would fit through. I turned the flashlight that was on my phone on and pushed through the small hole. The room was much bigger than I assumed it would be. I had almost assumed it would be a crawl space, but to my surprise, it was roughly a 10 by 10 room. I reached around the room until I found the light switch. I clicked the light switch on and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was war memorabilia as far as the eye could see. The thing that was odd was it was a war uniform I had never seen before. On the sleeves of the uniform, it said UDF. On the walls, there also seemed to be some odd types of melee weapons I had never seen before. Many of the weapons were constructed in a similar manner, usually in the shape of a bat, with some sort of steel spike on one end and a crowbar-looking edge on the other. Next to those were firearms that all shared the same steel spike that the melee weapons had. I couldn't think of any real practical use for any of the spikes on the weapons. Maybe my grandfather just enjoyed the way they looked and had made these uniforms himself. I really wanted to know what the UDF stood for. So as I kept digging, I found a couple of boxes and popped them open. Inside I found multiple copies of the journal he used to carry around. On the front cover it would say the years it covered and then some sort of title, I guess to explain what time period it was about. I saw one that went from 2008 to 2014 titled Soldier, another from 2015 to 2019 titled Family Man, but then it seemed to skip a 10-year span. From 2020 to 2030, I couldn't find a book to go with that. Keep in mind, most of the older books were covered in so much dust, I had to hold myself together from sneezing. So I finally found a desk in the corner and noticed there was a book lying on the table. It was the book I was looking for. It read 2020 to 2030, The Lost Generation. This seemed really odd because all the other titles were really upbeat and positive, while this one seemed depressing and the book was visibly beaten up in compared to the other books. This one also seemed to be used the most as well. There were tons of notes in the margins, which I could barely understand. My grandfather had been an accountant, and didn't make much sense that he had all this military attire. He used to say the army was the best thing he ever did, but he pretty much never used firearms afterwards, and completely changed his career field after the military, going from law enforcement to accounting. Nothing in the room made sense, so I was hoping this book might have some of my answers. The book says on the front page, "All must be forgotten in order to ensure the future." I heard the sound of footsteps coming up the stairs and headed their way to this room. I got up quick and got up to the room and covered it back up with a panel. Luckily there was a spare room and I would be able to come back later. I spent the rest of the evening listening to the stories of my grandfather. These were stories I had never heard before. To me, he was just this timid old man that never really spoke much. But to everybody else, he was almost like a hero. So by the end of the night, I finally got the courage to ask my father about 2020 to 2030. From those years, he would have gone from the age of 5 to 15. He looked at me harshly and asked why I wanted to know about it. I told him it was because he never talked about it, and I wanted to know more about him and my grandfather. He told me his father was a very private man, like his father before. He said he had a really hard time remembering what happened during that time, and he could tell he was kind of irritated he couldn't remember. I told him that it wasn't a big deal, and I dropped the conversation completely. I waited for everybody to head to bed, and went back up into the room again. I used my pocket knife to carefully open the panel up again, without waking anyone up. I then made my way back over to the desk and grabbed the journal. Upon better inspection, I noticed that it seemed to have some kind of dried brown stains on it. I wasn't sure if this was dirt or something else. All I know is that the message on the front page was oddly cryptic, and I needed to know more about this lost generation. I flipped to the first page and it was dated September 9th, 2020. Happy birthday to me! It's 2020 and now I'm 31 years old. It's been 7 months since this pandemic started and I'm starting to get stir crazy. Feels like the days just go on and on without any end. The worst part is I'm still stuck going to work while everyone else is working from home. Things aren't all that bad though. My kids are all still healthy and we have another child on the way next year. Things are looking up and hopefully everything will blow over soon. September 10th, 2020. One more day and it's the weekend. Can't wait to play some video games with my son this weekend and just not have to go to work for a few days. I need to try and write a few scripts this weekend and get some videos up. Probably won't write much for the next few days, but I'll try and give it a shot. September 12th, 2020. Figured I would put this in here, but the news has been showing up some weird stuff going on in the major cities. I mean, these riots have been happening for a few months now, and that's bad, but the stuff they're saying people are doing to each other is freaking crazy. The worst part is the YouTube videos I'm seeing covering this stuff are either remarkably edited or something absolutely awful is happening in the cities. I watched a protester rip the throat out of a police officer with his teeth. I think I'm going to go to the store and pick up some supplies. Might need to go pick up another rifle and some ammo as well, just to be safe. Hopefully this will all blow over and I'll just be out a couple $100. September 13th, 2020. So I went to Walmart yesterday to pick up some supplies and it was a complete cluster there. Everyone was as worked up as I was, and there was no ammo left to pick up. The food was pretty low too, but I picked up as much as I could and went back home. While I was out though, I saw a few people and it looked like they were fighting in the parking lot. I got the hell out of there as quick as I could and went to the Home Depot. I grabbed some boards and bars, just in case I needed to barricade the house. I've read too many post-apocalyptic stories to not try and get ready for just in case. Hopefully I'm overreacting like everyone else is. September 14th, 2020. I'm starting to think I'm not overreacting. Rachel showed me a news article today saying that they think the virus has turned extremely fatal. Almost everyone that has contacted has started dropping dead. The hospitals are overflowing and local authorities are telling everyone to stay in their houses and not let anyone in no matter what. I took this as a good time to put the boards up and bars in the windows in the basement. I don't usually get worked up like this, but this is the worst I've seen it in a long time. Rachel and I are going to try to keep the kids as calm as we can, because it seems like they're starting to notice something is off. I'm going to finish up with the repairs and then try and get some sleep. Probably going to avoid video games for a while just so I can focus on task. September 15th, 2020. I'm so glad I decided to board up the house last night because we had some people try to break in and rob us. It was around 3 a.m. and 3 guys tried to kick the door in. The boards held, and the craziest part was the cops drove by, saw that they were beating the house, and just opened fire on them. I'm so lucky that we all sleep on the second floor because otherwise they probably would have killed us all. I tried to call the police to report what had happened, but couldn't get through. I then checked online to see if maybe the phone lines were down at the police station, but I couldn't find anything, so I kept the kids from going near the windows. I've got to figure out what to do with these bodies. September 16th, 2020. I ended up using a ladder to go down to the second floor from the first to try and move the bodies. At this point, the bodies were starting to smell pretty ripe, and I didn't want anyone to get sick. So I covered myself in every kind of PPE I could find and carefully climbed down the ladder. Luckily, these guys were all pretty small, so it wasn't too bad to get them out of eyeshot of the kids. I still couldn't believe that the cops had just shot these guys and left them here without stopping. I almost doubt they're even cops at all. I tried calling the cops one more time, but still couldn't get through. The reports in the news and social media all stated that it was almost a full-blown war at this point in major cities. Anyone that was in the cities was told to shelter in place and stay off the damn streets. We started seeing the word zombie come up more and more, and don't get me wrong, I love a good zombie book, but there was no way these reports could be true. This has to just be the worst riot in history, right?
This has been Fear. Come back next week to find out what happens on The Lost Generation.